On March 8, 2014, Eliza got married to Richard Fletcher at the Dixon Gallery and Gardens in Memphis. Friends who knew the couple described her as athletic and warm. Richard would later talk about the early strain of their marriage and how the two of them leaned into faith and counseling to work through it together. By 2022, they had been married for 8 years and were raising 2 lovely young sons. Eliza and Richard were active members of Second Presbyterian Church in Memphis. Their pastor, George Robertson, described the couple as engaged and visible leaders within the congregation, the kind of family whose absence would always be felt. Eliza Fletcher was born in 1987 and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, into a family whose roots ran deep in the city's history. Her grandfather had helped build Orgel Inc. into the largest independent hardware distributor in the world, a company worth billions of dollars, woven into the identity of Memphis business for generations. But those who knew Liza said her family's wealth was never what defined her. She attended the Hutchison School, an all-girls institution in East Memphis, graduating in 2006. From there, she went south to Baylor University in Texas, earning a degree in exercise and sports science, a fitting course of study for a young woman who would spend the rest of her life in motion. She later returned to Tennessee to complete a master's degree in elementary education at Belmont University in Nashville. Teaching, it turned out, was where she belonged. Liza took a position as a junior kindergarten teacher at St. Mary's Episcopal School in Memphis, working with the youngest children in the building. The school described her as someone whose smile brightened every classroom she entered, and that she was not just a teacher to the children, she was also a friend, and they all loved her. She always made sure to look for a new and creative way to help every child in her classroom to be happy and better.
Hey girls, it's Miss Fletcher. So before we go, I wanted to remind you of something that we do at St. Mary's that's so special and that I miss a lot. So I want to see if you can join in with me. We're going to sing This Little Light of Mine. Okay? Ready? This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Eliza loved running. She was a disciplined and competitive athlete, the kind of runner who didn't just jog for exercise, but chased personal records with real intensity. In 2019, she completed the St. Jude Memphis Marathon in 22nd place overall, finishing in 3 hours, 26 minutes, and 9 seconds. That time was fast enough to qualify her for the Boston Marathon, one of the most competitive distance races in the world, an achievement that takes most amateur runners years, if they ever reach it at all. Every morning, long before the sun comes up, before her sons wake for school, Liza always laced up her shoes and ran. It was her normal way of living, a quiet hour that belonged to no one but her on streets she knew by heart. On the morning of Friday, September 2nd, 2022, she did exactly that. She left her home sometime before 4 a.m., taking a route she always did, a stretch of road near the University of Memphis campus that she had run countless times before. It was still very dark, in the particular way that only streetlights were doing most of the work for her to see. At 4:20 a.m., a surveillance camera near Central Avenue captured the last images anyone would ever record of Eliza alive. She was running steadily, dressed in a pink athletic top and purple running shorts, her blonde hair pulled up into a matching headband, dressed exactly like a woman who expected to be home again within the hour. The same camera also picked up a dark-colored GMC Terrain SUV. As investigators reviewed the footage, they realized the SUV had driven down the same road about 24 minutes earlier. Then it came back, and this time it didn't leave. It just stayed there. As Eliza ran past, a man later identified as 38-year-old Cleotha Abston got out of the SUV. According to the affidavit, he rushed toward her, forced her into the SUV, and drove away. The entire kidnapping happened in just a matter of seconds. Just over 2 hours later, a man riding his bicycle found a phone and a sandal on the ground. He picked them up and carried them to the nearest police officer he could find. He had no way of knowing it yet, but he was holding the last physical trace of a life that had been violently taken. Police were dispatched roughly an hour after that, By 7 a.m., when Eliza had not returned home, her family began to sense that something was deeply wrong. Memphis police received 2 calls that morning, one from her husband, Richard, and the other call from the University of Memphis staff who had noticed something amiss near campus. By 9 a.m., Memphis police had issued a citywide alert. The first local news stories began appearing online. By that evening, a heavy police presence had gathered outside the Fletchers' home, and deputies with the Shelby County Sheriff's Office had begun searching the Hope Park, a heavily wooded 342-acre green space roughly 1.5 miles from where she vanished, the kind of place where a missing person, or evidence of one, might be found among the trees. Her family did not wait quietly. They offered a $50,000 reward for any information leading to her safe return, and appealed directly to the public through Crime Stoppers, publishing a physical description down to her height, her weight, and the color of her eyes, the language of a family desperate for any lead, however small. As word spread through the city, Second Presbyterian Church posted a public plea for prayer. Her former high school, Hutchison, called her a beloved alumna. St. Mary's Episcopal School told its community that a teacher who had been reported missing that morning was in their thoughts and prayers. Meanwhile, investigators were putting the case together piece by piece, and they moved far more quickly than most people expected. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation ran the DNA recovered from the sandal through CODIS, the FBI's national database of DNA collected from convicted offenders. It came back with a match: Cleotha Abston, a felony record dating back more than 20 years. That result immediately made him the main suspect in Eliza's disappearance. From there, investigators began connecting the rest of the evidence. They reviewed surveillance footage from a movie theater on Germantown Parkway. He was taken the day before the kidnapping, and Cleotha was spotted wearing what appeared to be the same pair of sandals found near the scene. Next, they looked into the utilities registered at his home. The account was in the name of a woman named Gwendolyn Brown. A search of law enforcement databases showed that she owned a black 2013 GMC Terrain, the same make and model seen on surveillance video near the kidnapping. Even the partial license plate visible in the footage matched her vehicle. Investigators also contacted Cleotha's employer, who confirmed that he regularly drove the GMC Terrain for work and provided his cell phone number. When detectives analyzed his phone records, they found that his phone was in the area at the exact time Eliza was forced into the SUV. By then, all of the evidence was pointing to the same person. At 10:45 the next morning, members of the U.S. Marshal Service found the GMC Terrain backed into a parking space outside Cleotha's home. The license plate matched the one seen on camera. Investigators also noticed a distinctive dent in the rear passenger side taillight that matched the damage visible in the surveillance footage. A man matching Cleotha's description was spotted nearby. He tried to run, but officers caught him within minutes and took him into custody. As the investigation continued, 2 witnesses, including Cleotha's own brother, told police they had seen him cleaning the inside of the GMC with floor cleaner and washing clothes in a sink. Investigators later said that those actions were an attempt to destroy forensic evidence before police arrived. Even with a suspect in custody, Eliza Fletcher was still missing. For 2 more days, no one knew where she was. But by then, her case had spread far beyond Memphis. By Saturday and Sunday, people across the country were following the search. Among those paying especially close attention were runners, many of them women who never met Eliza but saw themselves in her story. Online, they shared the same unsettling question: could this happen to me? That question hit so hard because Eliza hadn't been somewhere unfamiliar or doing something considered risky. She was running the same route she had taken many times before, near a university, during her usual early morning routine. For countless runners, it was the kind of situation that had always felt relatively safe. After her kidnapping, many said they no longer felt that same sense of security. In the days that followed, that feeling turned into action. Runners organized group runs in cities including Boston, Nashville, and Knoxville. Those communities had no direct connection to the case. that they shared the same early morning routine and understood how deeply the story had shaken people who simply loved to run. On Monday, September 5th, investigators found a body behind an abandoned duplex in South Memphis, just a few minutes from an apartment belonging to Cleotha Abston's brother. At the time, authorities were not ready to confirm the person's identity. For the rest of the day, the city waited for answers. The next morning, the Memphis Police Department confirmed what many had already feared. The body was Eliza Fletcher. A later autopsy found that she had died from a gunshot wound of a head. The medical examiner also documented injuries to her right leg and jaw, injuries that were consistent with a violent struggle. Less than an hour after her identity was confirmed, prosecutors upgraded the case against Cleotha, adding charges of first-degree murder and first-degree murder committed during the perpetration of a kidnapping. That same morning, he appeared in a Shelby County courtroom wearing a green jail-issued jumpsuit with his hands cuffed behind his back. Behind a face mask, he showed little expression. At a press conference later that day, Shelby County District Attorney Steve Mulroy addressed the case, saying, "Repeat violent offenders deserve a strong response, and that's what they'll get from this district attorney's office." Memphis Police Chief Sarah Lynn Davis called it a very sad day for the city. Eliza's family also shared a statement, describing her as a source of joy to everyone who knew her, her family, her friends, her students, her fellow parishioners, and the many people whose lives she had touched. At St. Mary's Episcopal School where she taught, faculty and staff gathered in the chapel and lit candles in her memory. It was a simple, quiet tribute to a teacher who had devoted so much of her life to helping children learn. In the days that followed, the grief spread well beyond Memphis. In Boston, around 40 runners met on the Esplanade before sunrise. They observed a moment of silence, then ran a 5K along the Charles River. Symbolically finishing the run Eliza never had the chance to complete. In Nashville, local running clubs organized a memorial run that began at 4 a.m., matching the time that she had been kidnapped. And in Knoxville, members of a track club ran 3.4 miles in her honor, inviting people across the country to log miles of their own. Even runners who had never met Eliza and never been to Memphis joined in simply because their story had stayed with them. As the investigation continued, a clearer picture of Cleotha Abston's cast began to emerge. It also raised difficult questions about how someone with such a long criminal history had been free to return to the same community where Eliza Fletcher went for her morning runs. Court records showed that Cleotha's encounters with law enforcement began when he was still a child. His first serious contact with the police came in 1995 when he was 12 years old. The exact details were never made public, though a judge later described the incident as serious. By 2000, at the age of 16, his crimes had become much more severe. He kidnapped a well-known Memphis attorney at gunpoint and forced him to withdraw money from an ATM. He was convicted of aggravated kidnapping, sentenced as an adult, and spent the next 20 years in prison. He was released in 2020. About a year later, in 2021, Cleotha met a 22-year-old woman named Alicia Franklin. The two had connected through a dating app and spent several weeks talking before deciding to meet in person. Alicia agreed to pick him up near an apartment complex in southeast Memphis, where Cleotha worked as a maintenance employee. According to Alicia, when she entered the apartment, she found it empty and unfurnished. She later told investigators that Cleotha pulled a gun on her. Alicia said he forced her into a vehicle behind the property and raped her at gunpoint. She told him she was 4 months pregnant, but she said the assault continued. Afterwards, she reported that he walked her back to the vacant apartment before driving away. Alicia made it to a hospital and then to a rape crisis center, where she underwent a forensic examination. She gave investigators Cleotha's name, his phone number, information about his social media accounts, and a description of the vehicle he drove. She believed an arrest would come soon. It didn't. Her rape kit remained untested for months. Alicia later said that when she called for updates, she was told the testing process could take a year or two. Although she had already identified Cleotha in a photo lineup and provided investigators with extensive identifying information, Memphis police did not request expedited testing. Looking back on the case, Alicia told a local reporter, "I was just an average black girl in the city of Memphis. I just think it wasn't a priority." For the next 11 months, Cleotha Abston remained free. Then in September 2022, he kidnapped and killed Eliza Fletcher. As investigators worked urgently to identify Eliza's attacker, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation finally processed Alicia's rape kit. The DNA results were completed on September 5, 2022, the same day Eliza's body was found, and one day after Cleotha had already been arrested in connection with her kidnapping. The testing confirmed what Alicia had reported nearly a year earlier. Cleotha Abston was the man who assaulted her. Only after Cleotha was publicly identified in one of Memphis's highest-profile murder cases was he indicted on charges related to Alicia's assault. Alicia later said she believed Eliza Fletcher might still be alive if her own case had been investigated more thoroughly from the beginning. She filed a lawsuit against the city of Memphis, arguing that failures in the investigation allowed Cleotha to remain free and commit another violent crime. A Tennessee appellate court later ruled that the city was legally immune from the lawsuit under the state's sovereign immunity laws. The decision resolved the legal case, but for many people in Memphis, it did not settle the broader questions about how Alicia's investigation had been handled. In April 2024, a jury found Cleotha guilty of aggravated rape, aggravated kidnapping, and unlawful possession of a weapon in Alicia's case. The following month, on May 17th, Cleotha waived his right to a formal sentencing hearing and accepted the maximum sentence available: 40 years for the rape, 20 years for the kidnapping, and 20 years for the weapons offense, all to be served consecutively for a total of 80 years. While imposing the sentence, Judge Lee Coffey noted that Cleotha's prison disciplinary record included incidents involving indecent exposure as well as possession of drugs and weapons while incarcerated. Reflecting on the case, Assistant District Attorney Paul Hagerman said it was deeply unfortunate that it took Eliza's death for Alicia's case to receive the attention it should have had from the beginning. Cleotha Abston's trial for Eliza Fletcher was originally scheduled for February 2025. Prosecutors had stated their intention to seek the death penalty if he were convicted. But on October 28, 2024, in a Shelby County courtroom, Cleotha entered guilty pleas to first-degree murder, especially aggravated kidnapping, and a separate weapons charge. Judge Lee Coffey sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder, 40 years for the kidnapping, and 8 years from the weapons charge, all to run concurrently with the sentence he was already serving in the Alicia Franklin case. The plea brought the case to a close without a trial, sparing the Fletcher family the ordeal of testimony and cross-examination. Cleotha's own attorney later explained that the defense had spent months telling their client the case offered little realistic chance of a different outcome at trial. District Attorney Steve Mulrowy addressed the resolution publicly. "In terms of public safety," he said, "this dangerous person we know for sure will never be out on the streets again." Eliza Fletcher's family was given the opportunity to address Cleotha Abston directly in a statement released through the district attorney's office. They did not soften it. "You have changed our lives forever," they told him, "and nothing will ever be the same." They went on to say that Eliza had done nothing to deserve what happened to her, that she would have been the first person to help him had he ever needed it. In simple terms, Cleotha Abston received sentences in 2 separate cases. In Alicia Franklin's case, he was sentenced to a total of 80 years, with the 3 individual sentences running one after another. In Eliza Fletcher's case, the sentence does not add more consecutive time on top of those 80 years. Instead, it runs at the same time. In practice, though, that distinction doesn't change the outcome. Because Cleotha was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for Eliza Fletcher's murder, he'll spend the rest of his life in prison regardless of how the sentence in Alicia Franklin case is structured. Eliza Fletcher was 34 years old. She left behind her husband, 2 young sons, the students whose lives she touched as a teacher, and a city that followed the search for her with hope until the heartbreaking outcome became clear. Her case sparked conversations that continued long after the news coverage faded. One focused on the risks of releasing repeat violent offenders and whether enough is being done to monitor them after they leave prison. The other centered on how sexual assault cases are investigated and whether every victim receives the same level of urgency and attention. Nearly a year before Eliza was kidnapped, Alicia Franklin had given investigators detailed information identifying Cleotha as the man she said had assaulted her. But her rape kit remained untested for months. Both women deserved a system that responded quickly and effectively. The events that followed have led many people to ask whether a different response could have changed what happened next. What do you think personally? Today, Eliza is remembered not only for the tragedy of her death, but for the life she lived. She was a devoted mother, a wife, a teacher, and a runner who loved her early morning routine. Those who knew her remember her kindness, her commitment to her students, and the care she showed the people around her. That is the legacy her family, friends, and community continue to hold on to. Thanks for watching. Please take a second to leave a comment on what you think about this case. It genuinely helps these stories stay in front of people who needs to hear it. That is all for today's story. Like, share, and subscribe. It's totally free. Thank you, and stay safe out there.